Hello and welcome to the Relax, It's Retirement podcast with your host, Josh Leonard, where we talk about transitioning into retirement with intent. I'm Wendy McConnell. Of course, we have Pete Belcastro as well. I'm so sorry. Almost forgot. Oh, how could I have? How could I have done that?
I don't know, Wendy. Good to be back.
Pete's back at it, He was in Italy and then a little under the weather. So, it's great to have you back, Pete.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you always tend to catch a little something, it seems, whenever you're on a plane for too long, Just too close to other people, I guess. I don't know.
Somebody had told me to take some zinc leading up a couple of days before a trip. However, I never remember until the day before. So if you can remember, put that zinc out on the counter and take it a few days before and a few days after.
Zinc by the sink.
Zinc by, I like it.
Gosh. Oh, I have trained you well. I'm going to take credit for that one.
It's yours, Wendy. It's yours. I'll take some additional supplements and vitamins around traveling. To me, though, I think the real key is just get some extra rest. I think for me, I don't sleep well on planes or sometimes don't sleep as well traveling in general. And that seems to get me quite frequently.
Good advice. Advice.
Zinc by the sink. Key takeaway.
Love it. I love it. So we're not going to be talking about health today and supplements. We will be talking about capital losses versus capital gains. Is that correct?
That is. And I can tie it in with health too. So much as we were just saying zinc by the sink, maybe get some extra rest, take some vitamin C when you're traveling. I would say it's just like training, like when I'm training for a bike race or any major athletic feat, you need that time to rest as well. So there's a duality in that, you want to train as much as you possibly can, but if you don't give yourself enough time to recover, you can have some major issues. You're more prone to injury, all that kind of stuff. I think typically in financial circles, we hear a lot about tax loss harvesting. This idea that I'm going to sell off some losers to offset my gains. And while that's good, I think we often miss capital gain harvesting or the ability to sell off some winners and kind of reset that cost basis. So today we're going to talk through both and make the case, especially in retirement, that maybe we need to look at our gain harvesting a little bit more.
Yeah, just like Josh said, rest, recovery. We all kind of work in different cycles, so we wake up, we go to sleep, we need that rest. We need that time to reset. And oftentimes whenever we do financial planning, our goal is gains. We want these things to appreciate, right? We want these things to be worth more tomorrow than they were today. And oftentimes we kind of forget that sometimes there's some things we can do whenever we aren't seeing those gains, whenever we actually have experienced a loss. So if you don't take advantage of those whenever your holdings or positions are at a loss, you actually might be missing out on some things.
Yeah, and I think this is typically the time of the year that people start looking for that, right? Maybe they had some gains in their portfolio throughout the year, so they're looking and saying, hey, do I have a loser to offset some of those gains that I had?
Is that typically a problem, finding a loser?
Oh, hopefully, right? I mean, you bring up a great point, Wendy. We ultimately don't want any losers, right? And I think one of the problems or maybe overlooked things with capital loss harvesting is if we sell off that loser, we sell it, we have to wait at least 30 days to avoid any tax disqualification or wash sale rules to buy the same thing back. So if we really love an individual stock, but it had gone down for a period of time and we sell it, maybe we miss some appreciation in that stock. Maybe in that 30 days, or maybe we take a little bit longer, it's 40 days, that stock skyrockets, right? Especially if it's a more volatile or maybe a younger company where the stock is bouncing all over the place. I think another one is, well, by selling it at a loss and then rebuying it, if that's not the case, at a lower point, in the future, the gain might be even larger. assuming those stocks are long-term winners, which they should be if we're planning on holding them, right? But I think it's a common rebalancing we look for at the end of the year, right? We want to find something to help offset the gains within our portfolio. I would say this is probably more important during your high earning years, right? There, we're constantly looking for tax deductions. If we have an after or a taxable portfolio, we want to minimize those taxes as much as possible. If this is money in your IRA or 401k, we don't need to worry about this conversation at all because it's tax deferred in that situation.
So let's talk about the term harvesting. I'm not really even sure. What does that mean? I mean, harvesting is when you get your vegetables out of your garden, right?
That's right, Wendy. So whenever you do have an investment, there's certain things that happen that you don't have to worry about every year. So if you buy a particular, let's just say a stock, let's just say you buy it at $10, and then at the end of the year it's worth $20, you're like, that's great. But what happens is that's not realized. Okay, so that's an unrealized growth. So what we tend to do is we'll take a look at that growth and we'll say, hey, does it make sense to sell that now at $20? Well, once you sell that, Wendy, you have to pay taxes on that $10, right? Uncle Sam wants their money. So you've realized that game. You've made it real, So it's whenever it's just on paper, we know that value is going to fluctuate. Okay, so whenever we talk about harvesting that gain, we are realizing it. We're saying, hey, that was on paper a $10 gain. Now it's in the bank account, $10.
Yeah, the harvesting is the selling, right? So if it's like your garden, right, you have really good maybe tomatoes, cucumbers, whatever. I don't know. What's your favorite crop, Wendy?
Well, I do tomatoes. We do cucumbers as well.
Okay.
A little bit of spices.
Okay. Yeah, so you might have a great yield of tomatoes, right? And those tomatoes look really good, and you're like, you know what, I'm going to pick them tomorrow. Once you pick them, then it's harvested, right? It's not going to grow anymore. But you've also avoided the risk of, a critter coming and attacking that tomato, or maybe some bugs getting to it, or whatever it might be. Right? So you'd be harvesting that to take advantage of it. What Pete just talked through would be selling a stock to harvest that gain, right? We're locking in that gain. It's not going to go anywhere once we pick it off the vine or sell that stock. Stock loss harvesting is the opposite, right? It's gone down in value, so now we're going to sell it and lock in that loss.
Okay, so we don't have to pay taxes on a loss then.
Correct, and a loss can offset a gain. So if Pete just had a $10 gain on that one stock that he sold, and there's another stock in his portfolio that has gone down, let's say $10 as well, he could sell that one to offset the gain in the other one.
Okay, that makes sense.
So that's why we typically look at this in a portfolio. Now, in very volatile years, maybe you sell everything or major pieces of your portfolio to lock in a long-term loss that you're able to carry over from year to year as well. That can be another good tax mitigation strategy. I think where we see capital gain harvesting coming into play a lot more, especially in retirement, is the higher limits for capital gains. If you're over 65 and married filing joint, your standard deduction in 2024 is $32,300. Now, your capital gains for a couple married filing joint don't start until after $94,050. So we add those two together, you need to be making a good amount of money in retirement to even have taxable gains within your portfolio. So one of the strategies we can do to harvest those gains is sell off enough of the portfolio where we're realizing a capital gain. It just happens to be in a 0% tax bracket. So we're filling up that tax bracket.
Yeah. So that sounds pretty good. No taxes, we'll take it.
Yeah. And I think what it does is it frees up money in the future. So let's say that you're looking to replace a vehicle in 10 years from now, right? if we've harvested those gains along the way, in your taxable stock portfolio, there might not be a lot of gains at that time. So at that point, even if you're buying, let's say, a $60,000 car, and normally that would push you up to make those capital gains taxable, if we've been harvesting a little bit along the way, we have enough in our barn, we have enough tomatoes, cucumbers in the freezer, right, that we can bring them all out and entertain the whole party, right? We can buy that $60,000 car without making our capital gains taxable in that individual year.
So it's a little bit like saving?
Yeah, I mean, it's all saving, right? It's in our investment portfolio. We're just kind of tracking it along the way. We're trying to manage the future tax impact.
Yeah, you don't want to be someplace where you owe a whole bunch of gains on a position where it's going to, potentially bump you up into the next tax bracket. Or if you would have done a little better planning, that you might not have had to pay any tax at all. It could be pretty impactful. Oftentimes people like a particular stock, and you don't want to get rid of that. But we find that we actually can find a really comparable company or position or stock that you can actually kind of make like a lateral movement. So kind of like the Coke to Pepsi thing. Like, I get it that, Coke is different than Pepsi and you can like one or the other, but we're both in the cola industries. We're both going to trend about the same. So that's another strategy that you can do. So like Josh said, if we do these trades within 30 days, you can miss that tax benefit. So the timing is important, to whenever you're doing these things.
Yeah, I think we have to watch the 30-day rule, certainly, on capital losses, because then those wash sale rules come into play, right? So we can't sell Coke and buy Coke back right away and try to have a loss on our tax return. If we're harvesting the gains, we have slightly different rules. We can sell Coke. Uncle Sam is always willing to take your gain in taxable, quote unquote, again, if we're falling in 0% tax brackets, it's not actually taxable, and buy it back the next day. Uncle Sam doesn't care because it's a gain. It's only the loss. It's only when you're trying to reduce the taxable event, which in this case would be the gain, that Uncle Sam even cares, right? In the tax code, it's viewed as, hey, you know what? If you want to cause yourself more taxes, you can do that continuously. Where we, need to watch it is on the losses. However, the tax code is not thinking, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Retiree are trying to fill up their tax brackets each and every year to avoid the long-term tax in a later year. I think we also see this come into play with clients a lot that maybe bought company stock outside of their 401k plan. So maybe you worked for an employer for many, many years, and you have a concentration of your company stock. And you never really thought about it too much. It just kind of accumulated on the side. And now it's very highly taxable, right? Like maybe you paid $3 or $4 for the share, and now they're worth $20 or $30. So you've always had it in your mind that you don't want to sell that because, well, I don't need the extra taxable gain. Well, in your working years, that might have been true, where you were always hitting that 15% tax bracket, or 15% of your capital gains were taxable. In retirement, that might not be the case, especially when we're mixing in Social Security that's taxed at a lower rate. Maybe you're spending a little less too as well. So a lot of times we see clients falling into that 0% capital gains bracket in retirement. So it's a good thing to look at. I think Pete, I know Pete spent a lot of time at the end of last year, shortly after joining the team, going through client tax returns with us and taking a look at where they're falling in their projected tax brackets for the year. This is a great service that advisors can do for clients to take a look and say, hey, you know what? We're about to enter the fourth quarter of the year. Where are we standing tax-wise at this point? Is there something we should be doing to fill up our tax brackets? Or if you're still working and in those higher income years, should we be looking to take a loss, to sell off some positions?
Yeah.
So now is the time to be looking over everything to make some decisions.
It's certainly the time to start the discussion. We always say fourth quarter, it's the fourth quarter of the game, right? You're looking near the end of the game. We can see how things are moving along. There can always be upsets at the end of a game. It's football season now, Wendy. So,
there's a 2-minute warning.
I think the issue with waiting for a 2-minute warning with all of our tax planning is there might be some time delays, typically around the holidays. A lot of financial institutions, like many businesses, have time off and might have delays in processing time. So we always like to start it in the fourth quarter with clients.
Keeping with the 2-minute warning, if you're going to wait until the 2-minute warning, then the clock's going to slow down a whole lot. A bunch of timeouts are going to be taken. It's going to be a really slow process.
I think really slow process is right. Yeah. And too many commercial breaks, just too many commercial breaks,
I second that one.
I didn't really grow up watching basketball, but I went to school in Cleveland, so the Cavs, and this was sort of as LeBron left and then later came back. So big basketball town, and I remember the first few games watching with friends. I'm like, man, is this ever going to end? It was like the whole game went really quick, and then the last few minutes are like a whole nother game. I'm like, this is painful.
Oh, yes.
You guys just keep fouling each other. Just finish the game already.
That's it. But when that buzzer sounds, whenever it's December 31st, it's done. So yeah, you definitely got to take all your shots. You got to have everything completed by that date. So, the time's not going to stop though, like it can in sports there.
So how do we know which one we should be doing?
Yeah. Meet with your financial advisor is step one. If you really feel confident in your own tax planning, certainly you can do some projections on your own to see where you think you might be falling in your tax returns. We always feel like a second set of eyes is helpful in that situation. Many times people are overlooked, or certain situations are overlooked. They forget that now on their bank accounts they have higher yield than they did in years past. So we need to make sure we factor in that interest when we're projecting our tax rates. Meeting with a financial advisor, or if you don't have a financial advisor, you're working with a CPA, you could call them. For most CPAs, we see that they're a little bit more reactive rather than proactive. You go and see them after the year is ended. So after the fourth quarter, and then you're watching the tape, right? You're watching the tape to say, hey, what did we do wrong in this game? And is there anything else we can do to fix it, right? We can argue that the balls were deflated, right? And that
bad ref calls. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That score is final.
Yeah. I think for us during the game is a little bit more important, right? There are some things we can do after the year ends, like IRA contributions to try to reduce, our taxes, depending on where your income falls. But if we're focused in on the fourth quarter, many times we can make larger steps to minimize our tax impact overall. Pete and I were at a Morningstar conference earlier this year, and we're listening to a tax piece. And I think one of the things that has really stuck with me over time is that the goal of tax planning in retirement planning is to not have zero taxes for 1 year. Instead, it's to have the lowest tax rate over your lifespan, right? So early on in retirement, many times folks will tell us, I didn't pay any taxes last year, right? I prepped my tax return and I didn't have to pay anything. That's fantastic. Well, to us, that's kind of a red flag that maybe we should have sold off some stock, right? Maybe we should have filled up that tax bracket the whole way. If they still had the opportunity to sell off $25,000 in capital gains from their company stock and they didn't do it, well, now that's a missed opportunity. That window's closed. As we progress through retirement, like to our RMD ages at age 73, where we're forced to take distributions, a lot of these windows close. We have less tax flexibility.
Yeah, people don't think that they have that many options whenever you stop working, and that's actually whenever we see the greatest benefit, because people have a little bit more control over their income. They have a little bit better understanding on what they need to live. You aren't saving for things like retirement. You're there, and other factors. Maybe maybe you're on Medicare and things like that. So It's really, really important, not only whenever you are maybe getting ready to retire, but those years that right after you do retire, we see the most benefit, well, actually, the most opportunity, I should say, for people to kind of mitigate their taxes. And like we say, I mean, you're going to pay taxes. One of those guarantees in life, but we want to make sure through proper planning that you don't pay one penny more than what you owe.
Okay. So, what are some things that people need to keep in mind?
Yeah, I think keep in mind, are you in a higher than average tax year or lower than average tax year? And these can occur if you're working or if you're retired, right? Sometimes we have clients that are retired, but they maybe had some stock options. Those stock options were exercised this year, and all of a sudden they're in a higher tax bracket. Well, we're not going to try to realize more gains that year, right? In that situation, if we're in a higher tax year, we want to look for a loss. If we're in a lower or an average tax year, maybe we want to realize some of those gains along the way. So I think good general rule, higher tax year, we want a loss, right? We want to reduce it. Lower tax year, we want to gain. Try to fill up those tax brackets. We always want to be careful in the long term, too. If we are continuously taking losses, we're going to have a higher long-term capital gain rate because we have more gain to potentially realize. However, if you're fortunate enough that maybe you plan to never sell those stocks, we can hold on to those for the next generation. There's a rule of a step up in basis at death. So if I choose to hold a stock my whole life and my boys inherit it whenever I pass away, the cost basis resets at my date of death. So even if I paid $1 for a stock and then I pass away at the age of 110, and that's now worth $200, there's $199 worth of gain in that stock. My boys' new cost basis would be at $200. So if they sold it that day, there'd be nothing taxable to them for capital gains. If they held on to it and it appreciated further than there, they would only pay on that additional gain.
From the 200, right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So sometimes we meet with clients and if they're not going to ever touch the stocks, maybe instead of doing this gain harvesting, it pays to look at something like a Roth conversion or something else to fill up a tax bracket.
So, Josh, what are the key takeaways?
Yeah, Wendy, I'd say the key takeaways are for tax loss harvesting. We're going to want to keep an eye out more so in our working years or those higher taxable years. Again, it might create that bigger tax problem in the long run, so we want to make sure that we're not setting ourselves up for disaster down the road. Tax gain harvesting, we want to focus on those lower taxability years, and most likely that's going to be in retirement. And that's something that we want to look at. Hey, we're realizing a gain now to keep our taxes lower in the long run. If you're listening today and you say, hey, this tax gain, tax loss, I hear you. I kind of get it, but I don't really know what I should do. Or maybe I need to have someone look at my tax situation before the year ends to realize a gain or a loss. We'd be happy to help. In the show notes, you can schedule a 15-minute consultation with Pete or I, where we can run through some of this, learn a little bit about your situation, and see if it might make sense to sell off some of your stocks. Tax planning, we feel like, is a key to retirement planning. It's one of 5 legs that we want to make sure that we're addressing with a proper retirement plan. Mostly we think of our investments, right? How am I allocated? What stocks, what bonds do I own? Is this the right combination? That's simply an investment plan. Once we stop working, we also need an income plan, a way to make sure that paychecks still keep coming in the door. Third of all, we need that tax plan, right? How do we minimize taxes with the income we need and the assets that we've saved? We also need a health plan. We need to transition into Medicare successfully and make sure we have some sort of plan for those long-term care expenses in the future. After all that, we need to make sure our legacy is intact. So whatever's left at the end of the day, let's make sure we get it to the next generation, charities, or loved ones that we want in the most efficient manner. So if you have concerns with retirement planning, we're happy to help. Schedule that 15-minute phone call, and we'll talk through any questions that you might have. In our next episode, Wendy, we'll be talking about, will the election destroy my retirement? This is a common question we're getting right now. Concerns around the election and what the impact might be for your retirement. Pete and Wendy, thank you so much for joining me today on this podcast. Make sure, if you haven't already, like, subscribe, and stay tuned for our next episode. Until next time, remember to retire with intent so you can make the most of your hard-earned savings.